Welcome to Simple Shifts, conversations to fuel your body, mind, and soul. I'm Martha McKinnon from the blog Simple Nourished Living, and with me is my brother and partner, Peter Morrison.
Hi,
Hi, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. How are you today?
I'm doing wonderfully. It's good to be here. It's good to catch up with you. It's been a little bit of a time since we last talked, at least a whole week.
Right?
So, today, what we're going to explore is ways to lighten up your favorite recipes. But before we jump into that, I love to sort of check in and ask you, put you on the hot seat. What's new? What's new and good in your world?
Well, our middle sister turned 60 recently, so we had a little, unfortunately, you weren't able to join us, but we did have a little birthday party celebration at home. She wanted to do something at home rather than out, so she picked the meal and did most of the grocery shopping, which was very kind. And then we
She
all
loves
got
to
together
shop.
and
It wasn't
yeah,
a, yeah, she loves to shop.
and it was she picked seared sea scallops, something I've never done. We've grilled scallops, but I've never seared them. So
Uh-huh.
I made the dessert, the salad, but I let her man the stove for the searing, and they came out wonderful. So
And I got to be there sort of virtually
mhm,
because you shared photos and video with me, so I appreciate that very much.
we did.
Yeah. So that was good. I felt like I was there. And I loved the candles that wouldn't blow out. I wouldn't.
I didn't even know they were supposed to be sparklers, and they didn't really sparkle. But yeah, they didn't blow out easily. So just an added birthday surprise, I guess.
Right. So ways to lighten up recipes is, I think, a great topic to explore in a little more depth. And the reason this came to me was that I was reviewing one of the really popular recipes on the site, which is a Pioneer Woman recipe that I lightened up. It's a recipe from Ree Drummond for chicken spaghetti. And I don't know how a lot of people I'm sure are familiar with Pioneer Woman, Ree Drummond. She's got tons of cookbooks. She's on the Food Network, but she's really known for her comfort food recipes. And a lot of us have favorite recipes that we don't really want to give up as we're trying to lose weight and eat healthier. But the truth is, there are lots of ways to take a recipe and lighten it up and make it a little more healthy. And so I thought that that would be fun to explore. With the recipe for chicken spaghetti, one of the first things I did, she makes sometimes her recipes, has a really big family. So one of the first things I did was make a smaller batch because we know from the mindless eating book that the more food we have around, the more we're apt to eat. So making a smaller batch, cutting a recipe, down in half or quarter is one thing you can do, especially if you're a small family. And then the other thing I did with the chicken spaghetti was kind of change up the ratio. So I used a lot more chicken, which is a 0 points, food, a good source of protein, and less spaghetti. And I do that often when I'm doing pasta recipes. I find it helpful to, cut back on the pasta, bulk up with veg, bulk up with the protein. And that way I find I get the satisfaction of pasta, but in a lighter, healthier, more Weight Watchers sort of friendly way. I use less cheese, and another option is to use, a reduced fat cheese. The recipe called for cream of chicken soup, and cream of chicken soup is available in healthier versions and lower fat, reduced fat, lower sodium versions. So that helps to make that ingredient healthier. And it turned out, in my mind, of course, I had never made it the regular way, but it made us really happy. It was comforting and delicious. It gets a lot of good reviews on the website. It's really very popular. And in fact, there was a comment from one of our readers, Beth, who basically said she loves Ree's recipes, but they tend to be pretty high in fat. And so it was great for her to see what I did with the recipe, because it really then inspired her to think about ways that she could take some of her favorite recipes or other recipes from the Pioneer Woman and make them, lighter and healthier. So,
I've never made that. Does it is are you using like ground chicken or uncooked chicken, or is it like already like shredded rotisserie chicken or
Like
something?
shredded rotisserie
Oh,
chicken.
okay.
Um, I think we might start by actually maybe poaching a whole chicken. And I, of course, am always looking for easier. So I love, so again, this is another recipe too, where I wouldn't typically make it if I didn't have leftover chicken around. I tend to be, I would have probably eaten the rotisserie chicken, and then this is a recipe I would make with the leftovers. Again, because I'm always looking to make things as easy as possible. And so for me have to cook chicken to then make a casserole seems a little too much work for a lazy girl like
Hmm.
me. So, but it's a great way to use leftover chicken. So that just brings up the whole concept of like, what are some of the other things you can do to lighten up recipes? What are some of your other, tips and hints for substitute ingredients, ingredients that work for you? Do you have any favorite like go-to substitutions for higher fat ingredients?
Um, it's not a higher fat substitution, but I would say we try to as much as we love bread and I love pasta, we just try to be careful with the carbs. And
Uh-huh.
I think I've been substituting, not only substituting, but you just using in general riced cauliflower, or even I think I've seen broccoli rice,
Mm-hmm.
um, in place of like rice in dishes.
Mm-hmm. And so we can link out in our notes too, because we have quite a few recipes on the site using cauliflower rice. And I remember when we first started doing this, you had to make the cauliflower rice yourself. But these days, it's so readily available in the frozen section. Everybody's making it now, right?
And oftentimes you could find it, or in some stores, it's available like near the shredded carrots and
Okay.
bagged. You could even find it, well, I guess it'd be fresh, not frozen. So
Right.
it sort of maintains a little bit more crunch and it kind of holds its shape.
Right. And if you
But
can't find it, if you live in an area where your stores aren't, your stores aren't as well stocked, it's not really that complicated to make either. You can grate it on a box grater, you can pulse it in a blender or food processor. And what I've found amazing was just how different the flavor is of, regular cauliflower versus rice cauliflower. It's just incredible to me how much it really does seem like rice. It doesn't seem like cauliflower anymore, just because you chopped it really fine. It's pretty
mm-hmm,
interesting.
mm-hmm.
How about Greek yogurt for in place of like sour cream, or that's a big one for me. I know. I just turned to Greek yogurt in so many recipes now, and it's a big savings over sour cream.
Yeah, I've used it in like if you've got a spicy taco soup and you want to
Hmm.
maybe tame it down a little and skip the sour cream, but a little dollop of Greek yogurt kind
Yep.
of adds a little cream, or even like enchiladas. It works really
On a baked
well.
potato, anywhere you would use sour cream, Greek yogurt is a great, much lower calorie, lower fat substitution. Another one is cottage cheese. If you take cottage cheese and you blitz it in the blender, and it gets really creamy, that can be a replacement in recipes for like light cream cheese, ricotta cheese.
Oh, really? Hmm.
That works. Yep. Again, bulking
Didn't.
up with veg is always a great idea, right? Just to bulk up your recipes, your soups, your casseroles, um,
Yeah,
your food.
mushrooms, chopped zucchini,
Yeah.
corn.
You can make your meat go further with fewer calories. But if you can use lentils to stretch your meat. You can also use finely chopped mushrooms. And again, people don't even know when they're finely chopped that way.
Hmm.
That can be a good one.
And with the lentils, they're quick to cook, unlike the dried bean, but many stores carry pre-steamed, vacuum
Right.
packed lentils that you just need to heat them up and they're good to go.
Right. That's true. So a lot more healthy products readily available on the grocery store shelves these days, which makes it so much easier. Things we used to have to do from, scratch are now right there for us. I mean, the other one that just pops into my mind is the steamed beets. It used to be
Mm,
you had to roast the
mm.
beets for an hour, and now often you can just find them in the produce section already cooked for you in the plastic sort of vacuum sealed packages. So they're just ready to go. You can have them in an instant.
Yeah, I'm not a big beet fan, but I do try to incorporate them into our salads and meals
Yep.
because I know they are very good for you. So I'm working on it.
Well, yeah, and I think there's so many foods out there. We don't have to eat what we don't like. I go back to sort of that concept from James Clear, Atomic Habits, where he talks about you're going to have most success in changing your habits if you can make it obvious, easy, attractive, and satisfying. And so if you're trying to eat healthier, it's best to find foods that you actually, like instead of forcing yourself to eat things that you don't. I think maybe some of the health benefits are even lost if we're gagging to get
Mm.
it down.
Well, it's not that bad, but
It's not that
um,
bad.
I actually like raw beets,
Hmm.
shredded beets. That's something of the flavor, texture. I think it's the flavor. Um,
Well, and
it's
that's really cool
it's
because we can link out because I just shared a recipe for a salad that I like very much, and it's just a combination of shredded beets and shredded carrots and a very simple lemon honey vinaigrette. I find that I love shredded crunchy slaws and salads. I
mm-hmm,
like that you can make
mm-hmm.
them and they'll last for several days in the fridge. So you've always got something there to grab when you need you're feeling a little hungry, and and if it's sitting right there in the fridge, it it's it makes it much more likely that you're gonna choose that versus the bag of chips from the pantry. So,
Right. So say you're a lasagna lover.
uh-huh.
What are some ideas you could do to lighten lasagna?
Well, again, we could do the whole cottage cheese or pureed cottage cheese in place of the ricotta. You can, you choose if you're using a meat, if you're making a meat lasagna, you could choose of course, a very lean
I mean,
beef or turkey. Again, if you were making the sauce from scratch, you could, like we said, chop up the mushrooms to make that meat extend further and take calories away that way. You could actually even play with um, substituting thin layers of like eggplant, roasted zucchini for some of your noodles. I've seen recipes that do that, which so you would just
mm.
thinly horizontally slice your zucchini, your eggplant, roast it, get it tender, and then use that for all or some of your noodles. And that would lighten it up, significantly.
That reminds me, I don't know if she mentioned when you were talking to her, but recently Brenda was watching PBS
Uh-huh.
and saw an Italian cooking show, and it was sort of eggplant parmesan, but the preparation, I guess, was a little different. It was sliced, the eggplant was sliced lengthwise,
Mm-hmm.
very thin, and I don't remember. I want to make it for the website because it was really good. I want to say dipped in. You'd think it would be egg then flour, but it was reversed or something. It was like flour and then egg, and then it was like stacked. And rather than mozzarella, I think it was Parmesan or Pecorino Romano, and it was
Mm-hmm.
sort of layered and stacked, and then they were sort of baked not as a lasagna, as a casserole, but like individual stacks. So you just had to
Uh-huh.
like lift each stack out of the pan, and it was very good. Again,
I
that's
think
not. Oh,
I
go
think we have
ahead.
an old recipe on the site, which is a more simple version of that. And it was just sliced the traditional
Oh,
way, not like long, but and it was grilled eggplant that were just layered with a little bit of sauce and just a tiny bit of light cheese. And I think it's called like grilled eggplant stacks or something. So it sounds maybe a little more
mm,
complicated than the
mm-hmm.
version that already lives out on Simple Nourish Living, but sounds
Interesting.
yummy. And again, I
It
love
was,
eggplant, but it can get heavy. And so
mm-hmm.
it's fun to play with ways to lighten up these dishes. But I think we've given a lot of good ideas on the cooking front. What about baking? Do you have any secrets for maybe using less, lightening up when you bake?
Secrets, no. But I
No.
have been trying, I've been really trying to pay attention to sugar
Uh-huh.
intake. So I've really been enjoying experimenting with Truvia baking blend and
Uh-huh.
allulose, more natural sweeteners. Sometimes it's a 1-to-1 replacement, and sometimes it's like half of what you would normally use for sugar. Um,
Right. Yeah, so you're right. So when you are using a sugar replacement, so one thing you can do is just lighten up on the amount of sugar.
Sugar.
Most
Mm-hmm.
recipes, especially recipe like American recipes, tend to be really sugar heavy. And I think I was talking with mom one time and she worked in way back in the day in the school system. And one thing she learned from cooks there was that you could cut back the sugar easily, usually by at least 25 to 30% in most recipes and barely notice it. So that's one thing you can do
Mm-hmm.
is just play with cutting back a percentage of the sugar and just using less. If you're liking the sugar, some of the sugar substitutes, like you said, you're going to want to pay attention to what the label of that package is saying because sometimes it's a 1-to-1 um, replacement. I think Splenda is like that, where Truvia is use half as much. So if the recipe calls for 1 cup, then on the package of Truvia, you're told to use half. And I'm not really sure. I haven't used monk fruit. I haven't used swerve enough to know without always checking the label to see what it's telling me. But using and finding those sugar replacements that work is one good strategy for lightening up your sweet treats if you're watching your sugar intake. And sugar has a lot of points, on the Weight
Mm-hmm.
Watchers plan. So that's something that a lot of us are paying closer attention to. In terms of lightening up recipes and using less, finding a substitution for the butter or oil, one thing that comes up a lot in lighter baking is using unsweetened applesauce or pumpkin puree or mashed bananas in place of all or part of the oil. And again, you're just going to have to sort of pay attention to what's going to work best depending on the recipe. Applesauce, I think, is probably the choice that offers is going to be closest probably to using the fat. If you're using pumpkin puree, it tends to be heavier, so that's often better in we've brownies, chocolate cakes, things like that, where it will be a little less noticeable. Some people are using Greek yogurt for all or some of the fat in recipes, and that can be another good substitution.
Would you have to use the full fat Greek yogurt?
No,
Not necessarily, no.
no, nope. No, and then the other one that comes up a lot, I first learned of, and it's been around now forever. Everybody knows about it now, but is the PB, the peanut butter
Mm.
flour, the powdered peanut butter, PB2. I mean, that can be a great replacement for people who love the flavor of peanut butter, but who don't want all the fat and calories that come from it. So that's a fun one to play with in baking, stirring together to make in sauces. I have a soup that I really like a lot that's calls for coconut milk and broccoli and peanut butter, and I will often use some of the peanut butter powder. So you get the flavor of the peanut butter in place of the peanut butter because it's in a soup, you don't really need all that fat, especially when you've got some coconut milk in there. And so that can be a substitution that works really well. And
I
then,
think, I mean, it's not really, it wouldn't be a really saving as far as Weight Watchers points are concerned, but I know some recipes also use honey or maple syrup.
mhm,
But again, those are going to be higher in points, but it's a natural sugar at least.
mhm,
It's not the processed, refined white sugar. So,
right.
um,
And again, I mean, that gets a little trickier if when you're
mm,
replacing like a liquid sweetener with a that gets a little more tricky. You got to do a little more, you got to do a little more research to figure out, do you have to add a little bit more liquid or just subtract a little more liquid depending on which way you're going, if you're adding honey when the recipe called for sugar or vice versa. Because baking especially can be complicated. There's quite a lot of chemistry involved with baking. So it's fun to play, but you just got to know and do a little research on how to do that and get the best results.
Yeah, and I've been using my kitchen scale more,
Hmm.
for especially for flours and whatnot, rather than because I feel like I don't know, something about getting it right in the measuring cup is just seems tricky too.
Yeah.
So
Most European home bakers use a scale and have used scales for years. That's just how they grew up, and it's something that's much less common here. But you're right. I mean, if you're baking and you're just depending upon cups, there really is a technique where the intention is that you fluff up that flour and you spoon it. You gently spoon it into the cup and then and level it off. And that's going to give you a much different result than if you just take that flour that's been sitting for a while and is packed down and like scoop it up. There can be a big difference. And so if you're finding that you bake and you're dissatisfied with the results because they seem heavy, dense, dry, there's a good chance that you're just getting more flour than you realized. And you're right. So using that kitchen scale can be a life, and it gets easier.
mhm.
You can just put the bowl on the scale and then, toss your flour in there, hit that tare button, and just keep adding other ingredients. So it can speed up the process and result in, dirtying fewer dishes and utensils too. So one more ingredient that's popping into my mind is unsweetened cocoa powder in place of, chocolate, because it's fat free. It doesn't have sugar, so that you can use the sweetener of your choice when you're using cocoa powder instead of chocolate chips. That can be a good savings. We've
Actually
got a
add
rest.
I occasionally add cocoa powder to my smoothies if I feel like I want a little extra treat.
Yep,
it looks more chocolatey. Yeah.
right. I love the combination of like a dark, like a chocolate cherry smoothie. It really feels like dessert for me. I have a favorite chocolate protein powder, and then frozen cherries. And sometimes I will like you say, I'll boost it with a little more unsweetened cocoa powder because the points are very low, and it does just give you this delicious chocolate cherry. It's just like I feel like it's a cold frozen chocolate covered cherry, but
Mm-hmm.
nutritious. It's got some nutrition in there, which is
Mm-hmm.
a bonus. So I think we've done a good job about exploring some of the most common ways that you can take one of your favorite recipes, either for cooking or baking, and lighten them up, make them healthier, lighter, less fat, lower calories. For those of you who are reading and watching this, if you have ideas of your own suggestions and tips that we've failed to mention here, would love for you to leave those for us in the comments. And if you're enjoying the content we're sharing here, I would love for you to subscribe to our channel, to leave a review. That would just be so helpful as we continue to try to grow our podcast world,
Audience,
our
subscribers. Yeah.
subscribers. Exactly.
Very
All
good.
right.
Very helpful. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in, and we'll be back soon. Have a good one. Take care.
Bye, everyone.